Well, as far as a contact high, let's say, how much of what they were undergoing was I feeling, sort of in resonance or in empathy or in sympathy. Um, Not that much, really. I really felt something very unique happening in the room. I suppose I felt a sense of, that whatever was going on there was really sacred. I may not have been able, you know, I may not have called what was happening in the room at the time sacred, but things really got quiet. Things really got quiet on the ward. Things really got quiet in the room, and it seemed like I was sort of orchestrating or supervising or maintaining people's bodies when their minds and their spirits were just really someplace else. So it seemed holy or sacred in a way, that I was helping these people have near death and spiritual experiences. I mean, I was just giving the drug and I'd done all the background work, but once it actually was happening, it was pretty remarkable. I mean, it was, I felt things. I didn't have, visions or sense of leaving my body or things. I mean, I really had to stay rather focused on the person. Um, but the room got shimmery and shiny and incredibly quiet. And, you know, there's a particular sense of sound on DMT that kind of is based on a very deep feeling of silence. It's like the sound that remains after you've struck a bell. I mean, you can't really hear the ringing anymore after it's gone, uh, but there's the impact there that's incredibly silent in contrast to the sound of that bell. And the room would take on that kind of silence, which I think is unique to the experience of DMT and perhaps the contact high around people that are under the influence. Um, in terms of when I realized I was in over my head, maybe, so to speak, with some of the stories I was hearing, I don't think I knew that until years later after I'd stopped the study. I was aware of a growing sense of discomfort with what I was doing because I just couldn't explain it. And it seemed to me if I couldn't model and explain what was going on that I was doing and just, uh, you know, bringing people to the edge of these kinds of experiences, it seemed like I ought to. Um, that it was a little irresponsible to be sort of pushing people off the cliff like that without really knowing exactly what it was and accepting and understanding and feeling comfortable with that model. And, you know, I think what began dawning on me after a while once I stopped the study was that I was really dealing with a spiritual phenomenon. I was able to think of things, or I was able to start to ask myself the questions about some of the phenomenon, which, in retrospect, were clearly spiritual. There was contact with non corporeal entities, angelic beings, you know, uh, experiences of death and after death and encounters with God, for lack of a better word. And even though I had a lot of, a lot of training within the Buddhist monastic, setting that I had worked in, and a lot of my own psychotherapeutic work, psychoanalytic work. Um, I didn't really have a firm footing on spiritual phenomenon themselves. The meditation work was more just as far as mind training to a large extent and how the mind worked. Um, and my psychotherapeutic, psychoanalytic training was more in terms of psychopathology and how people's personalities functioned or malfunctioned. But once I was really dipping into spiritual phenomenon, um, and especially with respect to just, these non corporeal encounters and the non corporeal worlds that people were entering, what I had trained in previously didn't really help me, didn't really provide an overarching framework that made sense that I could sort of heart to heart empathize with the volunteers over. So it really hasn't been since it's not really been um, any more recent than just the last year or two that I've just through my own work and study have started, you know, working within a particular, spiritual system that I think could contain and hold and and kind of run with people's experiences that they're having then. Yeah, I just don't think I was mature enough in some ways. It's maybe psychologically I was mature enough and scientifically, but I don't think I was spiritually mature enough. I started that study when I was 38. Um, and, that's pretty young for that kind of work, really blowing people's minds regularly and having them, through what I was doing, just be in these places. I just don't think I had my feet on the ground spiritually firmly enough.